Kincaid is that wide receiver / tight end that they have yet to get in the slot thus far. So I guess I was a pretty darn good football player.
At least fantasy. I can't really speak to the actual football, but fantasy football, yeah, you were a hell of a player.
Cut to it. Cut to it. Let's get down to it. Cut to it. Cut to it. Cut to it. Let's get down to it.
Steve, you know ball. But let me tell you a little something about fantasy football. We just talked a little while ago, Cam Wolf. We broke down a couple of teams. We're here to talk about even more teams, their wide receivers, where you should be taking them, where the value is in your upcoming draft. I don't care if it's season-long best ball. I don't care if it's week to week. We're here to let you know which wide receiver 2s and 3s may show up and be a wide receiver 1 for your team when you need it most.
Wide receiver 1? Really?
When you need it most. There's guys certain weeks. He's a true blue wide receiver 4 on the depth chart. But he has 3 catches for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns, and all of a sudden you're looking at 32 points. You just won yourself the week because you played a guy other people weren't even looking at. That happens. It's not, again, we're not looking at careers. We're not looking at, all right, who's the most talented. Week to week, this stuff changes. You could build a team out of completely undrafted guys, free agents, and win every single week. It's very difficult, near impossible, some would argue, but it could be done.
So these are guys that keep the train moving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's go on my own stopping grounds with the Baltimore Ravens. You got OBJ at wide receiver 50, which is, where is wide receiver 50? What round is that?
So this is probably 8th, 9th round pick, somewhere around there. If I had to,
how many rounds is it?
I mean, depending on your roster, you're starting standard league, you're starting 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a flex, and then some people play kickers in defense. Defense. So you're starting about 7 or 8 players. Okay. And then you have an additional 6 bench spots somewhere around there. So you've got about 14 people on your team. So
whoa. So how long is a draft? Because I do a cameo. I'll do cameo, and sometimes they have me introduce their draft order. And man, it's like 13 dudes. Yep. So if it's, bro, that's like the original draft back in the day.
It's a couple hours. Yeah, listen, people are grinding.
Hell no, dog.
People are grinding. Oh, yeah.
So I see why people get angry and agitated when the player doesn't perform, because you spent 10 hours doing the draft. Well, that ain't my fault.
Oh, you're doing the draft throughout the week. You're watching the waiver wire. You're setting your lineup. You're doing research on opposing defenses. You're seeing, is this guy having a good week in his personal life? It's a commitment. That's it. People do need to calm down with how they're talking to athletes about their fantasy team and everything else that's being introduced into the sports world right now. But it is a grind. There are people who are extremely dedicated to this fantasy life.
I would say dedicated, yes. Here's why the grind part is kind of fickle. What are you grinding, bro? Like, you're basically saying, hey, I think and hope that this player will show up this week. And if he doesn't, but not his fault. It's not like he woke up and said, you know what? I know Coley drafted me in the 12th round at the 50th wide receiver. So guess what? I ain't showing up for Coley. I ain't showing up for him today. He got it twisted. I'm not working.
No, but I mean, there is, like you do when you're breaking down teams, you're looking at other teams' defenses, how often is this guy running out of the slot? Fantasy players are doing that to a different extent, of course, and for a different purpose, but yeah, grind is me being tongue in cheek. It's not really a grind, but for people who take it seriously, like this is some people's, like myself included, full-time job is fantasy.
Yeah, I get that. I'm not trying to talk down to your job. I'm talking about when the part of some of it where it's not the players. he doesn't walk up to the coordinator and say, he doesn't go, I'm not showing up for Coley today. The Mick man, not showing up for him today. And he goes up to the coordinator, hey, don't throw me any passes. I'm trying to screw over Mick. I'm trying to screw over Mick today. That doesn't happen.
No.
But you guys act like he does. I knew you told him. I knew you did it. You did it just to spite me.
Well, there's also two other types of fantasy players, and there's the people who just look at the numbers, the analytics. They don't care what team you play for. They just care about winning. Then there's people like me. I never had Peyton Manning on my team. Not once. Despite the fact that he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league, I'm still a Patriots fan. How could I, in good faith, be rooting for the Patriots when I'm also rooting for the Colts to do well? That doesn't make any sense to me. So I will take really good players. They're off my draft board just because of personal vendettas, like you happen to be playing for a team I don't like in the real world.
So did I just create a new term? So you are openly saying that some of the people you have played fantasy with, they're fantasy hoes.
For sure, yeah.
Oh,
absolutely.
And your kids agree?
Yeah, but I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm loyal.
Yep. I hear. I just wanted to make sure. All right. So OBJ, 50th, and Zay Flowers is 51. Mm-hmm. I like the Zay Flowers. I know the OBJ. I think the odd man out in this is going to be Rashad Bateman. Because you still got Mark Andrews. He still got to get his catches in between the hashes. You got OBJ underneath. You got Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers is going to be that guy who's the reverses, the ghosts, the screens. When you get the ball in his hands, he's pretty darn effective. So I just like Zay as one of those guys that he may end up keeping your squad balling, and you don't even know it.
I think it's very interesting that they're the same team and basically being selected back to back between Odell and Zay, because you've got two completely different sides of the coin. You've got the veteran coming off injury where he's an unknown, but also a known when he's healthy.
Yep.
And then you've got Zay, who is a complete unknown, but you could argue has way more upside based on what we've seen him do in college and on the bowl circuit and things like that. So I think it's very interesting. You're seeing people value the veteran more in this moment, but I wouldn't be surprised if that switched after a couple preseason games.
The one thing, though, was Zay, and I don't know how this goes in fantasy, so help me.
Mm-hmm.
Zay is going to be one of those guys. I don't think he's going to have 15 catches, but I think he may have 4 to 8, 5 to 10 targets a game. But his yards after catch and his runaway and breakout ability is going to be off the charts. I could see him getting a ghost or a jet sweep and getting a 30-yard game, bro. How does that help fantasy?
So for a receiver, you're getting, in a standard scoring league, you're getting a point for every 10 yards. Doesn't matter if it's a run or if it's a catch. And a lot of people have historically played 1 point per reception, PPR. You've seen more people take that back down to a half point because players like Jarvis Landry, for example, a guy who's getting a high level of targets and receptions, but not a ton of yards, is outpacing other players who would get less receptions, but more yards just because he's stacking catch on top of catch on top of catch. So if you get a catch for 0 yards, if someone throws you a screen at the line of scrimmage and you get tackled, you get a point. And there's a lot of players who go, well, he didn't do anything. There's no reason you should be getting...
He caught the ball.
He did catch the ball. In real world, yes, that's better than potentially a fumble if it's a lateral.
True. Yeah.
But in fantasy, it's like, all right, is that better than a running back rushing for 9 yards and only getting 0.9 points there? You see what I'm saying? So it's like, should this guy be rewarded simply for just getting his hands on a ball? Or should it be more the yards, the yak, like you're talking about with Zay Flowers? So I do think that's going to be, especially if you think Odell doesn't have that anymore. He doesn't have that after the catch speed or being, especially with knee injuries, being able to cut and be as shifty. Then, yeah, I can see that being way more valuable.
Okay, so Zay Flowers with the yak will be more valuable
1,000%.
all around?
Yeah,
Because
and
I see him in open space balling.
Right, and if he's using that open space to get into the end zone, now you're talking about an extra 6 points every touchdown. Much like in the real world, you're getting 6 points.
So hypothetically, Zay Flowers on a 70-yard drive, he gets 2 passes. He gets a slant where he's almost 80% winning against a slant.
Mhm.
So he gets a slant and goes 15 yards, right?
Yeah.
He catches a 5-yard slant and goes 10 extra yards. Then they do something else, and yes, he gets the pass and he may scamper off for the touchdown to cap it off because, he's a young guy. They want to establish it, utilizing J.K. Dobbins, Lamar Jackson, and Zay Flowers. They do something fancy and some crazy cool design, and bang, he gets that touchdown. So say in that play, he gets 3 yards, 3 receptions for 45 yards, and 75% of that was yards after catch. How many points would that be? Would that be a lot of points?
Yeah, so it's the where you get the yards doesn't make extra or less points. You know what I mean? If you catch it and get tackled for 40 yards, or if you immediately, or if you catch it and run for 40 yards, that's the same 4 points. You know what I mean? It's not better or worse, but you do like someone who has that yards after catch ability. That's what separates like a Jarvis Landry from a Justin Jefferson. If they're getting the same amount of targets, if they're getting the same amount of receptions, but one's getting double the yards and touchdowns, yeah, obviously the guy with double the yards and touchdowns, much like in the real world, is more valuable. So it's you in a perfect world, you want both on your team. You want that balance because you want the consistency for when a boomer bust number one happens to run into a lockdown corner or happens to just have an off week. You want that steady Eddie who's going to put up your 10 points on a week-to-week basis. But yeah, so if Zay Flowers gets 3 for 45 and a touchdown?
Yeah.
So that's 3 points for 3 receptions in most leagues. That's 45 yards. That's 4.5 points. So you're up to 7.5 points. And then the touchdown 6. So that's 13.5 points, which for most guys on a given week is good eating.
Okay. Yeah, I had no idea. That's why I was asking you.
For sure.
I could see that, especially with this offense, where he can come out. He may only have 5 or 6 catches and mess around a yak and a touchdown. And, of what I know fantasy football to be, I didn't know that would almost be 7.5 or 6.5 points away from 20 points, which that's a lot of points.
It sure is. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I just learned something. I appreciate it. All right. So, I don't know if this is a true value, but the Los Angeles Chargers, you got Austin Eckler, you got Keenan Allen, you got Mike Williams, Quentin Johnson, big target. How is Quentin Johnson, just what you explained, not hating, how is Quentin Johnson ranked 46 compared to Zay Flowers, where both of these guys, because of the potential of being a red zone threat, Quentin Johnson?
No, it's truly, you're seeing his average draft position right now is completely reflective on where he was taken in the actual NFL draft, which was wide receiver 2. And you take that and you combine it with, people don't trust the Ravens offense from a passing standpoint. They didn't watch Zay Flowers. They saw Quentin Johnson. If they saw him at all, it was in the playoffs when he torched Michigan. And he was wide receiver 2 taken. They trust Justin Herbert's arm, I would assume, more than Lamar's. I would assume they trust Kellen Moore more than Monken. Whether or not it's correct is what I'm telling you what people are thinking. So it's really that. They see Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. They're both injury prone. So it's like, all right, if someone's going to step up in this offense, we know Herbert's going to throw the ball. We know Herbert's going to throw the ball. But I would take both of those, personally, I would take both of those Baltimore receivers before I took QJ. Okay. All right. So the Vikings. I like that. I can't rebuttal. The Vikings. You got Justin Jefferson. He's going to do his deal. Mm-hmm. Man, Jordan Addison, 38. That becomes really interesting with him being on the same field as TJ Hawkinson. I don't know if I go with
I 38. That's it.
So for underdogs and best ball leagues, you draft your players and that's it. You don't touch your roster again. What you get in the draft, you're not adding players, you're not trading. Who you get in the draft is who you're rolling with. And a popular strategy in best ball, you'll see it a lot with the Dolphins, you'll see it a lot with the Eagles, is called stacking. That's where you get multiple players from the same team. So if you take A.J. Brown, you better get Devonta Smith that way, because you know the offense on a week-to-week basis is going to put up points and is going to produce. So you want to make sure you're getting the top dog, so you're getting that bite from the apple, regardless of who it's coming from. What you're seeing with the Vikings, you know Justin Jefferson's wide receiver 1 in fantasy. Where he is in the real world, we'll debate that on a future show. In fantasy, he's wide receiver 1. If he goes down, if he gets locked up against the Packers like he did last year, you know the offense isn't going to put up no points. You know they're not going to put up 0 yards, but he may. So you want to have that handcuff. You want to have that stack of who you believe the wide receiver 2 is going to be. That's Addison, based on the void left from who's the Panthers? Adam Thielen leaving. Do people trust KJ Osborne? They're not sure yet. Addison, again, was just taken in the 20s, right behind QJ, right next to Zay Flowers. I can't remember if he was before or after. So it's like, all right, if I'm just thinking about the Vikings offense, their problems weren't on the offensive side of the ball last year. It was a defensive problem in Minnesota. Kirk Cousins' contract year historically works out well for Kirk Cousins. So you think this offense under O'Connell is going to continue what you saw last year. That's where Jordan Addison slides in. People aren't drafting him as a starter at this moment in time, but they're looking at him like, yeah, he's my first guy off the bench. If by the middle of the season he's a true option to play every week, that wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, that was just
it's a lot of
threw
information.
Me for a loop.
Yeah, it's a lot of information. I love it.
But even the information I'm retaining, and I get it. Just I didn't understand how you have a guy who is a 2 or a 3.
Yep.
Taking over. Zay Flowers is going to be the starter. I think Rashad Bateman goes at the number 3 wide receiver. OBJ, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, and Bateman are lined up because. So I just not sure, but that made sense. So going down to the Broncos. To the Browns. I'm sorry, to the Browns. Mari Cooper, you know what he's going to do. Nick Chubb, he's going to do his thing. Man, Elijah Moore is very interesting to me. I don't know why, I don't know how, but he makes me think that he may do some things that people just don't see coming out of it. He's at 48. Again, still don't always get it all, but I like Elijah Moore because he wasn't utilized a lot with the Jets.
Right.
Right. They moved on from him because they believe Alan Lazard and
the Packers,
Cobb,
the rest of the Packers, yeah.
The rest of the Packers crew is gonna out finesse what Elijah Moore is able to do. I kind of see Elijah Moore really sneaking in and making some plays. They've surrounded Deshaun Watson with a lot of weapons that I don't believe people and teams are going to expect the efficiency that we're going to get out of them with Nick Chubb running the football in the play action because that offense is built on play action.
Absolutely. And going into last season, people looked at the Jets and they said, oh, Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore is an incredible duo. They didn't know Elijah Moore was going to be completely written out of the offense based on the quarterback, based on all the problems the Jets had last year. So I'm with you. I think Elijah Moore is a great value here. I think he's probably being even a little underdrafted. I think it's an underrated stack if you're playing best ball between Cooper and Moore, or if you even want to put Njoku in there, since tight end is such a shallow position, if you want to stack that way with one of those receivers in Njoku.
That's a smart play then, based on what you're saying with stack. I like that.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I do like Elijah Moore a lot, and I think the Browns last year, He's not the same type of receiver at all as like a Donovan Peoples-Jones. Obviously, he's a
He's not.
much bigger body receiver, but just in terms of needing someone, Amari's not exactly Mr. Consistency. Season to season, he is. Game to game, not exactly. If you're looking for a more consistent option coming out of Cleveland, I think it's Elijah Moore.
Well, here's the funny thing. When you look at Elijah Moore and the routes that he's able to run, man, digs, curls, comebacks, flats, screens, slants, go routes. He can run a lot of different routes and be successful and win. 60% when he's running a go route, 81% on the deep out. That tells me because he gets his hips going, gets the DB and out of his back pedal, and all of a sudden he crosses his face. You run the same route, make it look the same, and then all of a sudden you go run a deep end. All of a sudden now that corner doesn't know what to do. All that corner knows is they need to get off the ball because the speed of Elijah Moore and his technique is really good. And you add a good coaching staff and a better quarterback, and all of a sudden things get real interesting real fast at the job of the corner at that time. So that could be tough, and that could be challenging on the corner to realize that you're outmanned in the middle of the football game.
Let me ask you maybe a weird question. Is there a specific type of wide receiver that performs better in colder, snowier conditions? I'm thinking like week 16, week 17. Like is someone who stretches the field on a slippery field a good thing because the corner might fall down or lose a step? Or is it a shiftier middle of the field guy because they don't even want to take, the offense doesn't want to take those deep shots because of the conditions? Or does it not matter at all?
It depends on the offense. It depends on the coordinator, right? It also depends on the quarterback. I would tell you, and I didn't believe it, but Deshaun does not play great in cold weather. Now, being in Cleveland, he will change because in Houston, they were indoors. They're not indoors in Cleveland. So I believe he will improve. But historically, Deshaun Watson does not always put up great numbers in the cold because he wasn't practicing and playing in the cold. I think he will adjust, and I think those numbers will disappear by the time the cold weather starts.
Yeah. Well, he's from Georgia, right? And then went to Clemson and then played for the Texans. So, yeah, I can imagine cold isn't his favorite.
When you're not around it, you don't know. I remember playing Tim Jernigan?
Yeah, Timmy Jernigan.
Yeah, from Florida. We were in Baltimore, it snowed. That was the first time he ever saw snow. Bro, he was like a kid, bro. Right. It was so cool to watch him. Because you see these athletes and you think with the checks that we can do anything. Yeah, we can. But when life hits you and you've been in a certain place for a certain amount of time, you don't always get to do and see the things that most people in other areas that's the norm for them. It's not the norm. It doesn't snow in Miami. No. It never snows in Florida.
Well,
real snow. How about
different kind of snow, yeah.
Yeah, different kind of snow, right? Well, they're both natural, but the snow that comes from the snow clouds. How about that?
The one that falls down, not goes up. The Bills becoming a more and more interesting team it's June. What should people put into June storylines? Like maybe the quarterback and star wide receiver don't like each other anymore.
I would say nothing.
Okay.
But when you have the stuff going on, there's something. And what is a great philosopher that we've known from a young time? Smokey the Bear. Only you can prevent forest fire. And it is a forest fire going on in Buffalo. You don't practice, you do practice. I normally say, man, don't play into it. But, man, the tweets and the non-tweets and the sub-tweets and the cryptic tweets and the showing and the not showing and the coach saying it's concerning. When your head coach says it's concerning, and all of a sudden, based off that, the next day you come and practice, obviously there's some conversations going on. Something's up. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to speculate.
Right.
And I don't even want to get into it. But you got to take it for what it's worth. And something's up, bro, and it's not all is great in Rochester, New York.
Well, if you're going into a draft right now and
You
it's early
nervous.
in the offseason, people are spending high capital on Stefon Diggs historically. Pretty much since Minnesota, people have been using high draft capital.
And you should, because he's a heck of a player.
Unbelievable talent, has been an incredible return on investment year in, year
Absolutely.
out. But right now, if you're trying to be Mr. Smarty Pants in your draft and you're going, okay, maybe Diggs isn't here, who's stepping up? You're probably pretty nervous about Gabe Davis based on what last year showed you as him as a number 2. What would you think of him as a number 1? Probably less equipped to handle that. And then, so do you turn to Dalton Kincaid? Do you turn to Khalil Shakir? Is that the option?
You got to turn to everybody, man. Listen, if you have Stefon Diggs on your roster based off the news you've gotten over the last couple of days, I would be as nervous as someone that is stone cold drunk getting pulled over by the cops. Nervous as hell, bro. I'm talking about you got mouthwash, breath mint, you doing everything. You ever see somebody that look like they up to no good?
Yeah.
Yes, I would be nervous. I'm nervous because I love Diggs. I'm looking at this offense and saying, this is a year with Dalton Kincaid. This is where they got their slot wide receiver. You got Dawson Knox. You got him at tight end. Dalton Kincaid is that wide receiver / tight end that they have yet to get in the slot thus far. Since Cole Beasley has gotten older and not on this team, they have given everybody and their mama opportunities to play slot receiver. And Dalton Kincaid is that slot receiver. So I would not say Dalton Kincaid is your number 1. But if something doesn't work out with Stefon Diggs, everybody by process of elimination moves up. And I'm not sure that's going to work out too well for the Bills. There's a lot of turnover. And I think this year may be the year that we can finally say there's been so much turnover. They're not going to be able to will themselves past if Stefon Diggs is not there. I just think it's going to come. The rooster has come in the hen house, and it ain't good.
Would this make you think differently about where you're taking Josh Allen as well?
That's a great question. I'm still nervous, bro. How many have you had to drink? Nothing. I'm drinking water. I'm refusing everything. Breathalyzer, blood test, everything.
I mean, the 49ers have kind of the opposite problem. They've got receivers and talent galore. We're just not sure who's throwing them the ball. We have
Man, we
ideas.
know who's throwing them the ball.
Huh?
We know who's throwing the ball. Brock Purdy's throwing the ball. Trey Lance will not, and Sam Darnold is not. Sam Darnold is a hell of a practice player. When the real action goes, he's not your guy. So
right.
I'm not even going with that tomfoolery.
Well, how confident should people be, even removing the injury, in Purdy year 2? Because now the rest of the league, he's not catching anyone by surprise anymore. They're going to call him the 7th round Mr. Irrelevant the rest of his career. They still talk about Tom Brady as a 6th round pick. So I know that's not going anywhere. But I don't think NFL defensive coordinators are looking at him that way. So is there any signs of regression we should be worried about? Again, even removing the injury.
Well, there's going to be, I don't know if it's regression. I think there's going to be the peaks and valleys. Mm-hmm. He's never played a full season in the NFL.
Right.
Now, I hope, as a 49ers fan, that he has these 18 weeks that people can finally say he's an NFL quarterback. I hope just for the league's sake, for a great story.
Right.
Right? Everybody is waiting for the next Tom Brady, Kirk Kurt Warner, now Brock Purdy. What's my guy? Butler, Malcolm Butler. Everybody's waiting for the great story, the Rich Gannon story where these guys just come out of nowhere, or they used to be, whatever the case may be. I just hope he does, just for argument's sake, to show that guys slip through the cracks and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big deal. Don't make a huge deal out of it. But also stop judging people based off schools and how they look in college, and just give guys the opportunity and coach them up. If he's successful or if he's just okay, I think it's going to be a great story, because his draft status and the great coaching by Brian Griese shows coaching matters.
Mm-hmm. You said he's never played a full season. None of the quarterbacks on their roster. Darnold's never played a full season, despite being in the league since 18. Lance obviously has played 2 games and some packages out before that. So yeah, they've built a whole team out of quarterbacks who have never once played a full season. So does that worry you if you're taking a Debo or an Ayuk? People are drafting Ayuk as a starter. Kittle is one of the top 3 tight ends every year. Christian McCaffrey, obviously, a lot of his value comes from being a receiver as well as an elite running back.
You have to, because ultimately Kyle Shanahan does a great job of scheming guys up. No matter who's the quarterback, you're going to see guys still make plays. And as long as they can throw the football, he's going to make plays. I would imagine to watch Sam Darnold play so well, so good in a preseason football, that people are going to be saying, man, he has a chance.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a sample size, but I believe Sam Darnold's a backup for the rest of his career.
Just to play the other side of the coin, I'm not a big Sam Darnold believer either, but this is far and away the best coaching staff, best talent he's had around him, really since USC.
Absolutely.
So is there a chance he could be looking better just because of the situation, not even because he did anything?
Yeah. I think if he continues to do this, he'll get a chance like
Geno.
No. Or Geno. No. I take it. Look at what happened with Marcus Mariota.
Okay.
He sat down, learned, looked great with the Raiders, and got picked up with Atlanta. Doesn't matter the outcome, but it just shows if you can get somewhere new, fresh perspective, new coaching, whether it's better playbook or better play calling, it can make a player better. That's why I keep saying coaching matters.
Absolutely. Debo even came out recently and said the production was obviously down from the year before, but he even said, I wasn't myself last year. I didn't play well. Do you think he can keep going with this hybrid role, or should he?
I don't think so.
Should he just stick to wide receiver and
I think he should stick to wide. I think he should stick to wide receiver, because he is a wide receiver. I believe also playing the way he plays, people can put him and say, well, look at Cordell Patterson. He doesn't run.
Right.
Cordell Patterson doesn't run as hard and physical the way Debo absorbs and runs to contact. You even saw last year, A.J. Brown, as the season got going, he started to step out of bounds a little bit. You saw Debo's too step out of bounds. You've seen Debo now also come up with some of that stuff. The beating on his body as a running back versus a wide receiver is different. It takes a little bit out of you. So I would imagine to be able to play as long as he desires to play, he's going to have to remove that hybrid and stay at wide receiver.
Yeah, this is where I feel like Tyler Lockett's the smartest man in the league. He's not taking a hit for nobody. He's not even thinking.
He's also built different, though.
For sure, but that's the up here that we talk about with Bryce Young and people like that. Knowing your limitations, knowing, hey, I enjoy walking. As a matter of fact, I don't want to lose that ability anytime soon.
Yeah, some people don't know their limitations, right? Like I can tell you right now, transitioning, Chicago, Chase Claypool, his limitation.
Already hurt.
He's already hurt?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Hamstring, huh?
It's something like that. I don't want to speak to the
tissue.
specifics, but I know it's a nagging, lingering injury is what they call it.
Part of that is I'm not going to say. I can't, because I come across as hate. I see Chase Claypool as he's such a talented but limited wide receiver in the same sentence. When you look at what he is on paper and you see some of the things he can do, and then you see a lot of the things that he maybe is not as good at, and then what you hear him say, they don't align with his perception of himself.
Right.
Like when I look at Chase Claypool, what kind of weapon is he? Man, he's a big body contested catch. That's what he is. How and where on the field, don't care. I'm just telling you what he is. DJ Moore, he can run routes. Mooney, I like Mooney as he's going to continue to have these big plays.
Mm-hmm.
Mooney had some catches last year that was just outstanding and ridiculous. I mean, one-handed catches over people. It was really good. So I'm excited to see with another talented wide receiver. You got Chase Claypool staying on the outside. You got DJ Moore in the mid-tier routes. Mooney, speed guy. All of a sudden, and then you have Justin Fields with his moving around the pocket. You got a better offensive line. You got Luke Getsy he got another year under his belt. They all know each other now. Man, I think this is a team that could take a step forward, and I believe all of the offensive weapons will take a step forward with them as well.
Yeah, Mooney, wide receiver 56 right now, feels super low to me.
That's super low.
I get the hesitation with the Bears offense. I understand why people aren't ready to buy all the way in yet. But we're talking about guys who literally haven't played NFL games being drafted ahead of wide receiver 56. That's where that's my disconnect. Like, we've seen Mooney do it even the year before Fields really took over. So that's
the shiny car. That's the shiny car syndrome, man.
Of course.
New car syndrome.
Of course. So I wouldn't be shocked if he moved up a lot as the preseason goes on. But yeah, if you're drafting right now, Mooney 56 I like that a lot. That's juicy.
Okay, so let's move on to the Packers, man.
Yeah.
Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Luke Musgrave. Then you got Aaron Jones, Grant DuBose, Jalen Reed. I like this squad. I would imagine they're going to surprise some people, because I also look at Matt LaFleur. He actually is going to have full ownership of this offense because his quarterback is not a Mr. Know-it-all. His quarterback is a good listener. Sorry.
He has to be. There's no other way for him to still be in the league if he's not. So I think people are undervaluing the Packers both in fantasy and in real life. It's still, and I'm sorry, Brian, it's still the NFC North. They could very well win this division. It's just a quarterback's an unknown at the moment. So it's
not unknown. It's not unknown. I would look at Matt LaFleur stepping up with his play calling and being seen for the young talented coach he was hired when he first got there, putting him in the same category of Mike McDaniels and Kyle Shanahan, Kevin Stefanski, Kevin O'Connell. I believe he has a quarterback that can be molded and shaped, and all older players, we are stuck in our ways because we've had success in those ways.
Right.
So when you've had success in those ways, whether it's an old offensive coordinator with success or a young coordinator with success, you're going, nah, this is how I throw or run a route or hit the hole or block, and I've gotten this far from it. I'm not always as warm and fuzzy to receive coaching when I've made it this far from what I've done. So I think this is going to happen. What I am, though, questioning, I don't think Christian Watson is that true wide receiver one that everybody believes he is. I don't think he runs great routes. He's a speed guy. Diggs routes, he's okay. Corner routes, 50%. Quick outs. I just think that he's a really good football player. I think Romeo Doubs, Grant DuBose, and Jalen Reed will turn out to be just as good, or it will be a collection of watching balls, this guy balls, that guy balls. So I think it's going to be a constant flow that nobody sees coming except Agent 89.
So there was a tweet I'm looking for. I can't find it right now, by Josh Norris, Underdog fantasy football expert. And he was saying the top 10 for wide receivers shifts drastically year to year. Mm-hmm. And the guys who make that leap most often aren't rookies. They aren't veterans. They're those year two guys. They've got that first year under their belt. Then and again, it's not necessarily what's happening on field. Is it turning into wins and losses? It's just more from a production standpoint. So if you had to bank on one of these two second-year guys, you're leaning Romeo?
I'm leaning Romeo. I could be wrong. When I look at Christian Watson and how long it took him, the plays that he made weren't great routes.
Right.
The plays that he made were about his athleticism. And that tells me a lot. Because that tells me that he's using his athleticism, and I know athleticism will get you in trouble at some point. Mm-hmm. Right? I'm not going to say a player's name, because if I do, then it's going to tweet and all that stuff. But I'm just telling you, when your athleticism leaves you, here's what I was saying. A lot of times, when you wake up with special athleticism, a lot of times those players, over time, shows you they don't have special work ethic.
Right. Which makes sense.
I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm just saying when I watch his routes, it's more athleticism. Yes, less he's running. Because when I look at routes, I go, okay, you're making lines. You're connecting the dots. I don't see him connecting the dots. I don't see him running routes and like leaving a corner because he gives them a wiggle and a corner's like, oh, he just outruns the guy. Outrunning a guy will get you in trouble when you're playing against a Champ Bailey, and all of a sudden you got to know how to win because that guy can run with you. And all of a sudden you don't have an answer but turn on the burners. And when you turn on the burners, you look up and he's running step for step with you. That's going to take some time for him to figure it out. And I think if he runs into that, Romeo Doubs will be the beneficiary of it. And Jalen Reed, I believe, is not being mentioned. He's not on the list. That people are going to be very shocked at his ability. Because when I saw Jalen Reed, when I evaluate his play more and more, with the ball in his hands, he reminds me with the ball in his hands of a Zay Flowers. Mm-hmm.
And for Dobbs specifically, if he dropped a ball last year, he knew he wasn't seeing one the rest of the day. That's just how Rodgers is. How freeing is that? And obviously Rodgers is an all-time great quarterback. It's not a shot at him. He's just very particular in his ways. How freeing is that for a second-year receiver knowing, if I make a mistake, that's not the end of the day for me? Like, will you be less likely to make a mistake because you're not thinking about it as much?
Well, here's what it does. It gives him an opportunity to, one, he's getting coached up. Now he actually gets in a game and he gets to find out with the coaching tip, does it actually work? Mm-hmm. Because when you mess up, you get coached up, but you never get the opportunity to see if it works. The best way to learn how to be a better route runner or a better player is on the field training. We all have an answer in the air-conditioned room.
Right.
We all know how to safely evacuate through an emergency until that emergency happens, and you have to process and breathe and execute. And you do that enough times, you start to get more and more familiar until when you finally have to do it, you have less and less panic and you're able to calm your nerves. He wasn't given that opportunity because that was not acceptable. Good or bad or indifferent doesn't matter. He has that chance now.
Speaking of Aaron Rodgers, the Jets. Garrett Wilson obviously emerging as a wide receiver one in year 2. Alan Lazard, McCole Hardman, Breece Hall.
Breece Hall health. Hardman, I watched him this year with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's a 2-time Super Bowl champ. All speed. I'm just worried. You have one of the best offensive coordinators who at times had a hard time figuring out your role in Kansas City. I don't necessarily see Nathaniel Hackett outdoing what Andy Reid was doing with him. I see Hardman as just a guy who's I don't know if this is the right word. I see him as decoy Leroy, man. I hate to say it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, part of me is wondering, he gets drafted to Kansas City, immediately gets compared to Tyreek Hill, just based on the speed. And I don't think Andy Reid thought of it that way. I don't think Patrick Mahomes thought of it that way. So it's
ain't no way.
Right. So can the Jets, because he doesn't have those expectations, can Aaron Rodgers say, hey, just do this one thing. I'll get you the ball when I can. But how much is that going to be on a week-to-week basis?
I think he'll be okay. Listen, he's a 2-time Super Bowl winning champ.
For sure.
Everybody's going to remind me that he won a Super Bowl. He did something I didn't do. I just don't see him having 1,000 yards.
No.
I also don't see he's fat. You got 11 people on the field. He's the 11th player, man.
Should anyone who, especially if you're in a keeper league, which you drafted guys. So a keeper league is you get to keep a certain amount of players per year. It makes
First of all, the fact that you drafted him.
Garrett Wilson?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought
I moved on. No.
Okay, my bad.
No disrespect.
Thank you, because I was confused.
But Garrett Wilson, if you have already drafted him, if you have him in a keeper league, if you're going to draft him, should there be any worry, specifically because Aaron Rodgers is so particular about who he's throwing the ball? Is there a chance he just doesn't like the way he runs his routes? Is there a chance he doesn't like the way he catches the ball? Is there a chance? Because I think there is.
I don't think it is, because it's been so much made of this in Green Bay, and he's now under a much better advanced microscope that people are going to be waiting for that one chance that he throws it to one of his buddies,
right,
or one of his former teammates over Wilson. That I don't think it's going to be there.
Okay.
And if you want to be competitive, you got to throw it to Garrett Wilson.
I agree.
Defenses are not sitting there shaking in their Timberland boots, because we're in New York, over Alan Lazard and Cobb. Cobb is a player, but he ain't Garrett Wilson playing like. That just isn't who he is anymore.
Right.
So Garrett Wilson is number one. Bottom line. And if you don't, I think if Garrett Wilson doesn't get off to a fast start, the New York media is going to jump on Aaron Rodgers very quickly, and I think they don't want that.
That's what worries me, because then Rodgers is going to be like, I'm going to throw to him even less. Now that people have pointed it out.
You could talk to your chest. You could talk with your chest all you want to right now, but for all of what we've seen Aaron do, I think it's unwanted attention that I don't think he wants to hear or deal with, and I don't blame him.
Oh, yeah, I don't blame him either. The Texans, a team with no attention, they They brought in Robert Woods, who said recently he still believes he can be a that. Huh?
Go ahead.
He said recently he could still be a 1,000-yard receiver. I respect the confidence.
I respect the confidence too.
John Mechie, de facto rookie.
John Mechie, I like him. Man, he's a little crafty in his routes. I like him.
I loved him coming out of Alabama specifically because of his route running. Obviously, he had the cancer last year, which caused him to miss the whole season. Glad he's recovered. Yeah. Glad he's back. Nico Collins, he's being taken as wide receiver 63, right behind Romeo Doubs, 14 spots ahead of Mechie. And Tank Dell is being taken as wide receiver 86. I know someone we both like a decent amount. So the thought process here is somebody on the Texans is going to catch passes. Obviously, they've got the rookie and CJs. No one all season is going to catch passes.
So this is really interesting. They have 13 wide receivers on their roster right now. 6 rookies and 7 with experience.
Right.
Some of them 7 have only played 1 year in the league, but they have experience. But they have a ton of rookies that they drafted this year. Mm-hmm. They got Johnson out of excuse me. Man. They got Johnson out of Oregon. They have Tank Dell. But then they also have Robert Woods. Robert Woods Robert Woods showed that coaching matters when he left Buffalo and became a really, really good player with the Rams. Then he went to the Vikings. He went to Titans. Wasn't his fault. And he was coming off a knee injury.
Right.
He's older. Wasn't necessarily known as this crafty and was used really for deep threat. Mm-hmm. I think he's 31 years old right now in his 11th year. Nico Collins, this is a guy that they like. I think he can play as well. But they got a lot of different football players. No team is carrying 13 wide receivers. No. They also have the kid out of Iowa State. What is his name?
Xavier
Hutchinson. Mm-hmm. They got him. They also have Parker Washington. They have him. They got so many different types of players. This offense that they have is same from the 49ers. A lot of the 75% of the league right now is running some type of offense like this. Mm-hmm. Somebody's going to be the odd man out. And I'm telling you right now, 7 of those experienced wide receivers will not be on this team.
Right.
Because these young boys have a lot of speed. Nico Collins, they like. But he wasn't drafted by them.
No.
And no matter what they say, they're going to say we love him. But you know who they love more?
Tank Dell.
The guys they drafted.
Yeah. Well, it was Caserio did take Nico Collins, but it was also with Easter being there.
Nazario ain't the head coach.
No, it's not the coach. It's still the GM.
Listen to me.
I understand.
The Texans are no longer being run by the general manager. That head coach is running that team. I'm just telling you, I hear what you're saying.
I understand what you're saying.
He ain't the guy. D'Amico Ryans is running that team. That's why he got players that he wants to fit that system. I'm telling you, Woods would probably be on that team. I would say Woods will probably not be dressing at some point before the end of the season. They're going to let these young boys run this team with their young quarterback. Let those guys grow together. And I would imagine if Nico Collins does not show consistency, because he has the ability, but consistency, I think these young boys are going to take over.
Yeah, and it makes sense. That's what you've seen throughout really all sports, not just football. When a new guy comes in, the old players kind of SOL. So when you look at all these guys and you're really trying to just from right now or this point in June 15th, you're trying to say, all right, who's actually going to contribute? Is it simply just
Mitchie
Dameon Pierce
and Dale? I think Dale too. Tank Dale has got to. He's a guy. He has a little bit of vertical stuff, but man, get him on the move. What you seen him in college, get him on the move, and that little tank is dangerous, right? CJ Stroud throwing him the football. You got Pierce. I would think the Texans will have a better offensive potency than the Atlanta Falcons, like Cam said.
Interesting.
They got young, fresh legs. Sometimes, you know who's the most dangerous?
The healthiest?
The naive guys.
Naive.
No, the naive.
Interesting. Because they don't care.
These dudes are just going to run.
Yeah. Like Pacheco last year.
Yes. Oh, I don't know what I'm doing, but I like how it feels.
Yeah, it's working. I mean,
yes.
Keep a stick with this.
Yes.
The Saints obviously switched up their quarterback entirely. Kamara had a very off year last year. Wasn't even on the field on passing downs. Michael Thomas, another kind of wasted year in probably the second half of his prime. Olave looked like the real deal. Juwan Johnson had moments. He's right now tight end 17. And Shaheed, wide receiver 71. What do you think of the Saints? What do you think of their pass catchers? Does Carr really move the needle much? I feel like I know his receivers, fantasy-wise, have put up numbers over the years. Devonta had a great year last year. Matt Collins had moments last year. But what do you think about these Saints?
Sheed is really an interesting thing because you can see that he's getting better and better. You can see that he's established himself as whatever he will be. You have to account for him being on the football field. I'm hesitant to say this, but I'm just worried. What does the Michael Thomas presence do for his numbers? Because you have Michael Thomas. He's not there. He's not wallpaper. He's not there for looks. Mm-hmm. We also know he's a certain type of football player. He's a contested catch. He's a slant. He's a comeback. He's through tight windows. You have Chris Olave where he's going, what he's shown. Juwan Johnson as tight end. And now you have Derek Carr. What is going to be interesting is what the offense says the ball should go to and what Derek Carr is familiar with. Mm. And I think that's the growing pains you're going to see. You're going to see quarterback's preference and the expectation of the wide receiver based on my pay and what I've been years prior. Michael Thomas has caught hundreds of passes. How does Michael Thomas handle only catching 75 this time?
Maybe he's thrilled because he hasn't done that in a few years.
I know when you get used to a certain way, it takes you a little bit of adjustment and growing pains. And Michael Thomas has never been a guy to shy to express how he feels.
No, he sure hasn't.
If you're used to catching 100+ passes when you're on the field, and now you have to share. Not everybody transitions playing in a sandbox together the same. And I'm not saying that he's a bad apple. I don't think so. But I do think it's going to take some adjustment, and we may see the growing pains of that adjustment displayed for all of us to see.
The Colts. Michael Pittman Jr., I feel like, has established himself as a solid wide receiver in this league with even more upside. Alec Pierce, he was a rookie last year.
Sneaky good.
Yeah, I'm not going to.
Sneaky good, bro.
I don't know what to really think of him because the Colts I'm not really trying to judge any Colts skill position players based on what happened last year. I would say it's not their fault.
It ain't their fault.
They brought in Isaiah McKenzie from Buffalo, who we talked about a little bit earlier.
I'm not expecting much out of him.
Right.
I'll be honest with you.
And they drafted Josh
Down. I like Josh Downs. He had this knee procedure done or something's up with his knee, so I'm not sure how long it'll take him to get up to speed. Alec Pierce, I watched him at Cincinnati in his game. He got a little wiggle to him. He could play and he's sneaky fast.
Right.
Sneaky fast meaning are you judging him because he's white?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm judging him on he's fast and he can play. His 4.6, 4.5, I think he's more than 4.4.
Mm-hmm.
He surprised a lot of people coming up with grabs. And I don't think he got a lot of credit in Cincinnati. And here's the other part. A lot of people don't realize they got one of the best wide receiver coaches out there. Reggie Wayne is helping these young men develop. And I would imagine another year under the belt, sitting in a room, watching film, and being coached by Reggie Wayne, Alec Pierce is going to go out there and ball again.
Now, obviously, they have a new quarterback in there, and I think the perception is, and I've seen real NFL teams have this same perception, when you have a big arm, not the most accurate quarterback, especially as a rookie, they try and key in on bigger-bodied, large catch radius receivers. The Colts didn't really do that. They went and they got Josh Downs. So are you thinking, or should someone going into a draft think, oh, Michael Pittman's going to eat because he's more established, he's the veteran, but he's the larger target. Whereas it may be, no, Josh Downs is actually going to be a better option because he can get more separation and become a more open target.
I don't know. I just worry. That's a tough one. Josh Downs is gonna ball. I just question, it's a legitimate question. Will Richardson be able to throw him the shorter, precise routes? I think as the game and the season, he will get better. But I think he's going to be off target a little bit. Josh is very shifty, and I think it's going to take them, especially now that Josh maybe, has some procedures sitting out. I think it's going to take some time for them to develop chemistry and get familiar with each other and how body movement and all that stuff works.
Yeah, I think it's fair. There's a receiver who's not on this list. He's not on a team yet. He's in Foxborough right now. Is DeAndre Hopkins at the point of his career where his fantasy value's tied to where he ends up, or is he quarterback proof?
Well, he's quarterback proof because he understands how to play football. But you can get on a bad team and it affects you.
His ceiling is still a variable. His floor is steady, but his ceiling could go up or down depending on where he goes.
It can. Look at his ceiling, how it was last year in Arizona. He was still a hell of a football player. It's just the team stunk.
The team stunk, but I think from a fantasy, I'm going to pull up his numbers. I think from a fantasy perspective, he was still putting up numbers.
Yeah, I know, but he wasn't. He was. I don't know. I don't.
Yeah, only to what we were talking about earlier. Only 3 touchdowns last year.
Exactly.
Over nine games, which 8 the year before, 6, 7, 11, 13. Hadn't put up that few since 2016 in Houston. And I believe that was before Deshaun. It was definitely before Deshaun. So since Deshaun, he had not had that kind of production, and he played more than half the season last year. So only 3 touchdowns. Yeah, that's something I'd be worried about. But
I'm very worried.
We've been talking about fantasy football this whole time. You, despite not playing fantasy football, have been in fantasy football for 15 years. Where do you think you ranked in terms of fantasy points from 2001 to 2016? All the wide receivers in the league. How many?
Well, is this a hater's perspective or?
There's facts. There's facts only.
Okay, so facts, not the imagination of Steve Smith.
Yeah, facts, not fiction. Where did
Okay.
Steve Smith Sr. rank for
I would
all
say
wide receivers from 01 to 15? Or 16, excuse me.
Well, I would say probably top 20. I would say so. If there's out of 32 teams or 32 wide receivers, I would say I was in the middle of the pack.
No, that'd be wrong. You were second only behind Larry Fitzgerald.
So I guess I was a pretty darn good football player.
At least fantasy. I can't really speak to the actual football, but fantasy football, yeah, you were a hell of a player.
Yeah. He came off the top rope. Wow. Well, I don't know about real life, but in his fake life, man, he was halfway decent.
Listen, you're the expert when it comes to real football. From a fan, I can't speak on that. Fantasy, yeah, you were as good as someone could be. Larry Fitz over that stretch put up 2,055 points. You put up 2,027 points. So just like think of just like one drop you had, that cost you the top spot right there.
Well, according to according to those people, when I was joking around with Tyreek Hill, hey Steve, how did that 35% drop radius help you? 2,027.8 fantasy points. So, how about that?
There's no chance you were dropping balls that frequently. There's no way.
That was one year I had, I think, 15 drops. There was also one year out of 100 and something catches, I had 5 drops.
Right. If I'm looking at someone, I'm trying to think of who's even known as like a drop guy right now. I think for my generation, at least watching football, Ted Ginn Jr. had that. He was you don't know if he's going to catch it or not guy.
Ted Ginn was my guy. So
no, I love Ted Ginn. I mean, he was electric. He stayed in the league for forever. So it's not even a shot. That's just not the most consistent hands. But how, from season to season, is that something that you can point to and be like,
yeah, you got to work on.
Okay.
Yeah, mine was psychological because I had the quarterback situation was so up and down.
Right.
So I started forcing things. And then also there were certain routes, the way I caught the ball, I was more aggressive.
Okay.
So I would actually bat the ball down. So it's a lot of things that go into it, but at the end of the day, you're supposed to catch the football.
Agreed.
That always helps.
Agreed. And you did that for the most part. That's what you did.
I did it decently.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I was decent. I'm not gonna say I'm one of the best, but I put myself in there where I surprised myself as a 3rd round pick. I should have not played for 16 years. I love it.
Cut to it, let's get down to it.